You have to understand, Hamza was a man of logic. To him, the world made sense. It was all just a collection of predictable patterns. You know, a creaking floorboard? That's just old wood. A shadow you see out of the corner of your eye? Just a trick of the light. But when he unlocked the door to apartment 307, he took a step into a place where all of that logic, it just started to unravel.
The landlord was odd. He was this man who seemed to be constantly looking at something just over Hamza's shoulder. And he gave him only one piece of advice, just a single whispered warning that would end up echoing in Hamza's mind long after he'd closed that door.
And the apartment itself, it was perfect. Honestly, it was almost too perfect. The kind of place you only find in a big city if you get really lucky. But there, in the corner of the bedroom, was this tall, silent shape, just standing there, draped in a dusty gray cloth. Was it a forgotten relic? Or maybe a very well-kept secret?
So of course he pulled it down. And there it was. Just this old, faded mirror with these thin little cracks stretching across its surface like frozen lightning. It looked normal. Unsettlingly normal even. Just an old piece of furniture. Or so he thought.
It wasn't until later that night, after he'd taken a shower, that the very first crack in his rational world started to show. It was a tiny thing, almost nothing really, but it was a detail that would change absolutely everything.
He blinked, and his reflection blinked with him. But for a single, heart-stopping moment, the man in the mirror had stayed perfectly still. A frozen image of himself, just a fraction of a second behind reality.
His mind just starts racing, right? He's desperately searching for any logical explanation. It had to be the old, warped glass, or a trick of the light, anything to push back that cold dread that was starting to seep into the room. He turned away from the mirror, probably a little faster than he would have liked to admit.
But the next night, there was just no denying it. He stood in front of it and raised his hand, slowly, deliberately. And the reflection, it raised its hand a fraction of a second before he did. Not with him, not after him, before.
So by the third night, that fear had started to change into this dangerous kind of curiosity. He wasn't running from the mirror anymore. No, he was determined to understand it, to test its impossible limits.
And that's when the horrifying truth really started to sink in. The man in the glass wasn't a reflection, it was a premonition. It was a perfect, terrifying glimpse into his own immediate future.
For a couple of days, he just played with it, you know? Little movements, a blink here, a turn there, and the mirror was never wrong. It perfectly predicted everything he did. It was his strange, private miracle. But on the fifth night, that miracle shattered.
He stood in front of the mirror, ready for another test. But this time, something was profoundly wrong. The image he saw wasn't showing him his own future anymore. It was showing him something else entirely.
See, Hamza felt calm, but the man in the mirror, he was terrified. His eyes were wide, his breath was short, he was slowly backing away. The reflection wasn't predicting Hamza's actions anymore. It was reacting to something in the room with him.
He whispered the words to himself, a cold dread just creeping up his spine. He could feel it now, that heavy, silent presence, the feeling of being watched. His reflection was shaking its head, literally begging him not to look.
But fear doesn't really listen to logic, does it? It doesn't obey warnings, even when they're coming from a version of yourself. He had to know. He just had to see. And there was nothing. Just silence and the familiar creak of the floorboards. He let out this shaky breath of relief. He even laughed, this nervous, broken sound. See, nothing. And that's when a sharp crack echoed through the apartment.
He spun back around to face the mirror, and the breath just caught in his throat. All that relief curdled into pure, absolute terror, because he wasn't alone in the reflection anymore.
It wasn't human. It was this impossibly tall, wrong-shaped thing that seemed to warp the very air around it. Just there, in the glass. It had no clear features, just a smudge where a face should be, an outline of a person that just did not belong in our world, standing right behind his reflection.
He watched, his blood turning to ice, as this creature in the mirror placed a long, skeletal hand on his reflection's shoulder. He could see it clear as day, but he couldn't feel a thing.
Yet, the thing in the glass smiled. a slow, impossible grin. And as a cold, heavy pressure settled on his real shoulder, a whisper slithered right beside his ear. "You're finally here." And the world just went dark.
The police found Hamza the next morning, just standing there, catatonic, in front of a shattered mirror. They called it a psychological break, a tragedy, but they missed one small detail.
Later that same day, as a new family was touring the now vacant apartment, their young son wandered into the bedroom. He saw something on the floor and picked up a shard of the broken mirror, a piece just big enough to see his own small face.
He looked into the glass, and his expression was just pure, innocent curiosity. His mother, who heard him from the hallway, just smiled, not understanding the question at all.
Because in that small shard of glass, a new figure was standing behind the boy. A figure with wide, terrified eyes and a frozen, silent scream. It was Hamza, and he was waving, desperately trying to warn the next person in line. The mirror was shattered, but its memory was not.